adjustment applications or minor zoning applications.
But with respect, Mr. Oliver, that's not what the bylaw says. It says prior to consulting any planning application.
Okay, so you're suggesting there's a contradiction between what's in the report and what's in the bylaw. Okay, fair enough. I will question them about that. Yeah. I do have one question for you, though, and this, when I read this report, I thought, well, assuming it clarifies at a very early stage for applicants what the requirements will likely be, it seemed like it was a good thing. I guess I'm struggling to understand why you feel it would not be a good thing if it puts out on the table at a very early stage the anticipated stakeholders, as you suggest, that they'll have to talk to, and studies that perhaps at that early stage staff feel would need to be done. Why wouldn't you and your client want to know that at the earliest possible stage, i.e. pre-consultation before your clients spent a lot of money?
That's the reason why we don't want to have to do it, because it does cost money for that free consultation. You just can't pick up the phone and get a planner at that hat. You may try 5 or 6, 3 or 4 phone calls to do that, or emails. It all takes time. And we're charging all that time out. Secondly, you may get into a dispute with the planner as to what studies are required. I have come before this council on several occasions where planning department has suggested that my client needs additional studies. I have opted to say, no, I don't think we need official studies. Let the council decide. Nothing stopping this council from saying, Mr. Klein, your application is deficient. We need more information. That's never happened to me, quite frankly. I've been turned down, but nobody has ever said to me around this table, your application is deficient because you haven't got this study or this report or that report. So it's a cost-benefit analysis. And I can't see the benefit coming to ratepayers of Norfolk County by placing this additional burden on this requirement before we even submit the application. I mean, it's my job to advise my client whether I think the application will be successful or otherwise. And it's on my shoulders if I make a mistake.
Anything further? Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Klein? I hear none. Thank you very much. Anyone else present who wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this matter? Good evening, Mr. Rowe.
Yeah, I actually, speaking more in general and maybe relating some of the experiences I've had and my clients have had, I agree with the comments that the other planning consultants have made, and I would note that the proposed amendment as it's coming through is a great improvement over the first proposal. What I want to, and I don't really have any specific issues with the wording of the amendments at all. What I'd like to do is talk about the pre-consultation meeting itself. As set out in the report, there is a whole wide range of county staff and others invited to them. What I find really is if you're there on, let's say, a more of fact-finding conceptual basis where you're trying to bring a proposal together, we have far too many staff there that are there to provide detailed questions or detailed answers, but frankly, this simply isn't required. My clients have said, they come into the room and said, well, my God, I know where my tax money's going. The room is full of people, and most of them don't have really anything to add. If you look at who should be there, well, planning staff and public works staff by and large. We don't need the tree guy there. Probably don't need the fire chief there unless you're looking at a site plan. And yet everybody feels they've got to have something to say because they're at the meeting. So my preference would be, especially on a more concept, general proposal, that we really just have planning staff and public works staff, because they, especially the staff that have more experience, do offer information that is necessary. You just don't need all of the rest of the staff. And one little story. Here we are at a meeting with talking about a $25 or $30 million proposal for a new plant, and our tree guy wants to talk about what species of trees we're going to plant along the driveway. I mean, my client was just blown away by that. I've had other clients who just simply feel overwhelmed. I often get calls from people who have gone and they phone me and said, I'll send you the minutes. I don't understand anything that staff have said, because by and large they're people that are in the industrial or commercial business, but they're not planners and they're not engineers, what have you. More recently, a fellow phoned and he's looking at purchasing a marina, and he has a purchase and sale agreement that he wants to finalize. And he sends me the minutes and says, well, what does this mean? Well, I said, well, number one, you've got environmental impact reports that are required. These are, by and large, these are provincial requirements. Unfortunately, county staff aren't experts in those areas, so they can't provide direction as to what levels of review would in fact be required. I myself have phoned different consultants and on an environmental impact report, and I've gotten quotes for $3,000 or $4,000 up to $40,000. And I have some sense of what I'm looking for. Applicants, and especially if they don't have any professional assistance, they just take one look at that and say, well, what's the point, and walk away. As far as, again, the complete application, I agree with a lot of the concerns that Mr. Klein has raised. We're not asking for these studies at the time of the pre-consultation. Maybe there's some misunderstanding. What they're talking about are reports required at the time of the formal submission of the application. Again, what can happen is, especially you get into the environmental type reports, the provincial government is good at making requirements. They're not so good at really having good data in a lot of cases, and they provide absolutely a very minimal amount of direction as to what level of detail or what level of study. Is this simply a matter of going out and inventorying what is there, or is it a four-season study, which means it's going to take over a year to do the report? And what I'm finding that even the consultants that are in those areas of expertise, there is wide-ranging opinion as to what needs to be done. I had one in another municipality that they asked for a hydrogeological report. In the other municipality, I got a quote from one of the larger, more international firms, and they wanted $40,000 to update their original report. I went to another consultant out of London, quite a well-respected one, and he was prepared to do it for something like $4,000 or $5,000. And I said, well, what's the difference? He said, well, some of the firms have never been accused of undercharging. So again, what it does is it puts the applicant really at a disadvantage. What it often does, it puts the county at a disadvantage because how many people just see what is being asked? Staff are unable to really provide a lot of guidance because, frankly, as planners, we're not experts in certain areas. And a lot of applicants just take one look and say, why bother? And away they go. One of the policies deal with the need for peer review, and those are studies to which county staff may not be equipped to fairly evaluate. So not only does the proponent pay for the original study, he gets to pay for somebody to review his consultant's study. I think the practice, certainly in this municipality, has been to limit those, and I would hope before peer reviews are being required that even some council direction may be in order. I know that we have done peer reviews for market impact assessments dealing with commercial developments, that type of thing, and yeah, and that probably does make sense. But I think staff here have, by and large, in terms of peer review requirements, have been fairly flexible in that regard. Now, will the pre-consultation process and the complete application process speed up the process? Well, pre-consultation does have its advantages, but what if we could lessen the number of actors, at least when we're dealing with more of a conceptual proposal as opposed to somebody coming with a full laid out site plan design. Well, yeah, maybe you do need more people there for that, but let's tailor the pre-consultation to the project and not the other way around. And in the end, when it comes to the request for reports and studies and that type of thing, ultimately, I think it should be up to council to decide whether the application, there's enough information to deal with the application. My concern, and I think Mr. Klein's concern, is there can be a tendency, and I've seen it in other municipalities where they've got the big checklist and they simply, well, it's on the list, so you need to do it, you know, and whether it makes sense or not. One other issue I ran into, and again, it was with we've got the Ministry of Natural Resources. They have designated most of Norfolk County as significant woodlands. If you got more than a half a dozen trees together, it seems that that's what it's designated. I've followed up with the M&R staff, and I said, well, how did you come up with? Well, we got some mapping from somebody. We're not really sure, but it's on the map. And I had one in minor boundary adjustment in one of our hamlets, and the planner, and she was right. Yeah, it's shown on the ministry mapping as being significant. Well, I took a look at it. Yeah, there was a couple dozen trees and some old Christmas trees that were just thrown there, grass clippings, what have you. And said, well, this can't possibly be. So went to the tree commission, your foresters, and said, can you go out and take a look at it? Well, that isn't what we do. Okay. You'll have to get a qualified consultant that can deal with forestry and that type of thing. So I phoned around, and I had a fellow from London. Well, I'll come down, and it's $2,500 to give you a look-see. Phoned another one, and he was even higher because he was going to come from Guelph. And then it dawned on me that this wasn't even large enough to qualify as a woodlot under your tree cutting bylaw. Yeah, it is different. Your tree cutting bylaw is different from what is designated as a significant woodland. So my conclusion was very simple. We could clear cut it, there wouldn't be a tree left, and that would solve the problem. And so I phoned the tree commissioner and I said, what are your thoughts on that? He said, well, I'll come out and take a look at it. So he came out, there was one American chestnut tree that has to be preserved. So yes, told my client, that's the tree you have to preserve. But again, this held up the process. Whenever there is an EIS, you have to go to the Norfolk Advisory Committee. I found the Advisory Committee actually to be very helpful. They are able to see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So, but the sad part was everything was based on some M&R mapping that was, really wasn't good information. And it's that type of thing that does hold up applications. In this particular case, what happened is the neighbors couldn't wait any longer, so they said, no, forget it. We don't need to do the boundary adjustment. So I think it's those things that we want to keep in mind. And I don't fault staff, especially on these types of studies, because most of it is downloaded from the province. And, the province says, you got to set up an advisory committee. They say you better start pumping all your septic systems every 5 years. They're great on ideas, but it gets sent to this table here, and then really I have to commend council and just say no. This county has, in the former region, has a long history of, when we did our first official plan in 1978, we were going to deviate from provincial policy. And what it took at that time was the 6 mayors and the regional chair to get in a car and go to meet with the minister at Queen's Park. In the end, we got our plan approved the way we wanted to do it. So I have to commend council on if it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't feel right for Norfolk County, then you got to tell the folks up there that it just isn't necessary. As far as these amendments, I'm satisfied with the way they're worded now. I think, again, staff have done a good job in that context. I would hope that for the pre-consultation from here on in, that they tailor the meetings and the number of participants to the particular type of application that's going to be discussed. And those are my comments anyway.
Mr. Rowe, any questions for Mr. Rowe? Councillor Wells?
To sum up, what you were saying is that you think what staff has presented is good, but they should tailor the meetings to more focus. Is that it in a nutshell?
That's it in a nutshell. The wording is there, and it is at discretion of staff. So I would.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Rowe.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present this evening who wishes to speak in opposition to DCS 1724? Anything further from this council? Councillor Black, please.
Well, I think, Mr. Mayor, we got some good comments from both presenters, Mr. Klein, Mr. Rowe, and certainly I would appreciate some comments from staff on what they had to say, whether they think there's some good ideas there that could be put into our planning processes or not.
Do you wish to comment, Shannon?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of some of the comments that were received, we do appreciate the feedback, and as I indicated, we did have a number of discussions with them and try to work with our development community in terms of incorporating a lot of those comments. With respect to what Mr. Rowe said in particular about the pre-consultation meetings, we can definitely work at focusing our pre-consultation meetings a little bit better and working on our communication. Currently, we do provide a checklist and follow-up to those meetings, and we have heard from some other regular attendees at our pre-consultation meetings in terms of some feedback. So over the next little while, we will be working to work on some of that implementation and kind of having maybe a little bit more of a focus group on that. In terms of the applications and processes, as you're well aware, as council, Norfolk County is definitely seeing an increase in terms of the number of applications and the development proposals that are coming forward. Along with that increase is also a number of them are increasing in terms of their complexity, the types of lands that are being implemented. We don't have as many of just the easy green fields available anymore. So in terms of some of those studies and reports, they do help us as staff make a recommendation and to bring forward to council. And if we have that information, it helps us in terms of being able to support applications and bring them forward to you. In the amendments as proposed, we do have an opportunity for exemptions to routine or minor zoning applications, as well as all committee of adjustment applications would not be required to go through that formal pre-consultation process. And further to that, I just had the thought just we do also allow or have some conversations just in terms of some general inquiries on that end. Additionally, in terms of the amendments as proposed, we have included some verbiage that if there are concerns or whatnot, that there is an opportunity for the manager of community planning or designate to exempt a proposal from coming forward or from fulfilling a portion of the pre-consultation or application requirements, as well as council has, we've included council in terms of that exemption process as well. So it still would allow an opportunity for an application if they're kind of maybe, if we want to call it a stalemate or a dead end in terms of the communication and requirements, that council can have an opportunity to step in and voice their decision at the end of the day in terms of the go forwards on that. And I think that's all.
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent answer. I appreciate that. And what I'm hearing and what I wanted to hear is that you have built in some flexibility into the process. You have some discretion. Staff has some discretion. Council has some discretion. And I know that all the applications are different. They're some more complicated and, small, medium, and large type, so they all need something different. And certainly it would be nice to know that there is that flexibility. If you really don't need, a traffic study in the rural area where there's, a couple of birds flying around, then don't ask for it. So that's good to know. So
More questions, please. Councillor Oliver, and then Height, then Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize to staff for having my back to them, but I will ask my question. You heard me question Mr. Klein, and he, I guess, correctly pointed out to me that what's in the staff report doesn't necessarily mean that's what's in the bylaw, and I've looked at the wording since he made that comment. So I would appreciate it if staff could comment back to me. We indicated in the staff report that committee of adjustment applications, et cetera, would be exempt, and yet the wording says exemption shall generally be granted to minor development applications.
Councillor Oliver, if I can just interrupt. Members of council, Councillor Oliver has gone to the bylaw on page 162 to deal with the wording. If you care to follow, I think this is an important issue. My apologies for interrupting.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. So I guess to staff, Mr. Mayor, can we get some further amendment to that wording on page 162 to address the fact, as Mr. Klein suggested, minor applications don't need to be subjected to this process, and in fact the staff report said the same thing.
And just to follow up while we're getting from staff, certainly there is no indication in the proposed bylaw of the word minor variance. You pointed this out. And secondly, minor rezoning applications. And I think that has to be clear in the bylaw. So we'll await your response to Councillor Oliver's question on the bylaw.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as Councillor Oliver did note, within the bylaw currently it says exemptions shall generally be granted to minor development applications and or minor amendments to previously processed applications for which other planning act approvals have been previously granted. The thought or the process in terms of that was to allow the flexibility for those minor consent applications or minor variance applications to be exempted. The thought also is that if they're part and parcel of maybe a larger application that accompanies an official plan amendment or something like that, that there would still be an opportunity for discussion. But if it's council's desire, we can work on the wording for that and
Okay.
bring it back in terms of a
Thank you.
revised
Proceed,
wording.
Councillor Oliver, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to staff for their response. I, for one, would feel a bit more comfortable if that wording could be worked on to be more specific about of what would be subject to the pre-consultation process and what would be exempt. Not generally exempt, but exempt. And I would suggest that those minor types of applications that Shannon just referred to and that Mr. Klein had reminded us of should be, there should be no generally, it should be an exempt because for all the reasons that have been talked about tonight.
Councillor Oliver, my suggestion, and I don't know if it's a good one or not, that'll be up to council, but should staff report DCS 1724 be approved, then we certainly could defer the bylaw to be worked on so the wording comes back, because that really is the final word, and I'll just go that far. I won't put my comments in here right now. That would not be appropriate. Councillor Height, Columbus, and then Councillor Brunton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Duke. Through you to staff, I think there were some very good points brought up by the speakers, and some of the stuff I think even the council is, if you allow me to be so bold, some of the studies that we get that come across with these applications, it's almost ridiculous at times. Traffic studies on gravel roads, environmental assessments for people's lawns. And right now, with the way I see it worded in this thing, it could tie up the entire application, and they would never have a complete application if they disagree with it. So you mentioned, the planning staff had mentioned that council has the ability to step in, but we would never get there from here if it's not a complete application. Or how would some proponent go about trying to get past staff into council looking for approval? And is there a timeline in days that they would have to suffer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll attempt to answer this one. First and foremost, I think it should be outlined that there's nothing in the process that talks to timelines in that regard. I do like to think that community planning staff are fairly flexible and reasonable, and we work well with our developers and agents and applicants. If there is ever a time that we can't agree on what should be accepted as a complete application, an agent applicant or property owner has the ability to come forward to council as a deputation and outline that, and council can of course give us the guidance and wisdom to move forward as they see fit.
So is that how people get here? When you have a refusal, they don't come and do a deputation?
In this case, for a complete application, it wouldn't be a refusal. There would be no application to provide council with. It would be the applicant or agent providing a deputation to council asking to waive a certain requirement, whether that's an EIS or a traffic study or that sort of thing.
So how would those people know that they have that right?
Through you, the mayor, it's outlined in the bylaw that the council has that right, and as friendly planning staff, we would also advise them of that right.
Okay, so as we do get planning reports on number of applications and things like that, so would we have one where it would summarize basically the pre-consultations, the applications, and the complete applications, like say on a semi-annual basis, so we can see which ones could have possibly dropped off that list?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't provide a tally right now. As you know, we have many inquiries through the planning division that don't end up into a formal application. And there are even those that attend pre-consultations that don't end up in a formal application. It may not be because of the requirements, it may be for other items, but if council's wanting a list of how many how many pre-consultation meetings we have compared to how many complete applications we receive, we can provide that information.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty straightforward. You only meet twice a month. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Columbus, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, staff, it's to staff, but Mr. Klein mentioned something about when the clock starts ticking with respect to the dates of the application and that type of thing. Can staff comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the timelines starting, with respect to that, it's upon receipt of a complete application, if the county does not act or make a decision within prescribed timelines as identified through the Planning Act, then it can be appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board. That doesn't necessarily relate back to applications that have been submitted that may not be complete or have all the sufficient information. If that is the case and an application is received to planning staff and is not deemed to be complete, then they would have the opportunity to come forward to council in terms of a deputation to speak towards those requirements.
Councillor Brunton?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I have a question, I guess, to Pam or Shannon, but I've been through this process a few years back, and I'm not sure, Pam, if you were involved in it back then. It was a deal with condominium development, and I found the very informal, and went through the process, and in the end we determined, based on all the information that we were given at that meeting, that it wasn't a viable project for us. But my question to you is, if we didn't adopt, like, you want to formalize this, but if you don't formalize it, would you still continue on with the Wednesday afternoon meetings for a major development of any sort? Or, like, somebody at the time told me, come in on a Wednesday afternoon and tell us what you're thinking in terms of a development. And that's what we did, and it provided a lot of information. But I'm just not clear as if you formalize it now, does that complicate the issue? Like, would you still continue on with the informal process if we said no?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would still continue on. The difference is formalizing the process creates consistency. It creates a consistent message. It formalizes it in terms of policy. It requires that we complete this annually and honestly. We've been doing this technically without those policies in place, and really those policies are needed.
I guess that's the debate, isn't it? Thank you.
Anything further? Thank you very much. I would like a mover and seconder to close this public meeting. Wells and Brunton have moved and seconded to close this public meeting. In favor? Carried. Thank you. I await your direction, councillors. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know whether you have a resolution signed yet or not.
It's not signed,
Not
but
signed.
it is, I believe, exactly what's printed
Well,
in
Mr.
the
Mayor,
agenda, so I'll just turn it back to you.
Yeah, thanks. I would certainly move the recommendation in the report with an addition, and that would be, assuming this needs to be said, Mr. Mayor, that amendments be made to the proposed bylaw text to reflect more clearly the types of applications that would or would not be subject to the pre-consultation. And that's wordier than it needs to be, and I'm sorry about that. But I don't support approving the proposed bylaw text as it is this evening. I'd like to see that changed. Staff have agreed that they could do that for us and bring it back.
And
for the
that,
bylaws.
if I may, and that amendments, I don't mean to interrupt, I apologize.
Okay.
And that amendments be made to the proposed bylaw to reflect, you said it, I just didn't get that
Yeah,
far.
to reflect the specific types of applications
Thank
that
you.
would be subject to the pre-consultation.
Thank you, sir.
Or not, well, yeah.
That's a mover, but I'll need a seconder. Councillor Black? It's there, and I will just read the further amendment from the mover. First of all, Oliver has moved, Black to seconded. First of all, that the proposed general amendment to Norfolk County official plan to implement policies regarding to pre-consultation be approved for reasons as outlined in the report. Secondly, that the proposed general amendment to the Norfolk County official plan to implement policies relating to complete applications be approved as outlined in the reasons in the report, and that public input has been received for this application and evaluated and included as part of the preparation of the recommendation, and that amendments be made to the proposed bylaw to reflect the specific types of applications that would be subject to pre-consultation. Discussion further. Councillor Brunton.
Just very simple, Your Worship. If we defeat the motion, does the status quo stay in place?
My understanding is it stays in place unless there's further direction from council.
Thank you.
We're agreeing on something here. Thank you. Further discussion? You've heard the motion. Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried. I see 6 for and 2 against, and I certainly support this. And certainly we got some work to do on the bylaw, and we'll have that bylaw pulled from being, please.
We'll pull both 2OP and 3OP.
OP official plan 2 and 3. Thank you. Okay. Is it dark out yet? Feels like the morning sun is coming up there. Okay, we're going to continue with our meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your thing. I'm going now to staff report DCS 1725. This is Norfolk County zoning bylaw 1Z 2014 amendment to establish zoning bylaws relating to shipping containers. I'm on page 71. And I will now open the public meeting of DCS 1725. Again, Shannon, you're giving this report as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I am.
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon again. This presentation is with respect to report DCS 1725 in regards to a zoning amendment for the regulation of shipping containers within the county. This is initiated as part or as a follow-up to a report that was presented to council last year in regards to shipping containers. That report included the recommendation or the layout of 4 options for council. One was a do-nothing approach. One was a separate bylaw through the Municipal Act. One was an all-out ban, and the other was a zoning, an amendment to our Norfolk County zoning bylaw. Council's direction at that time was for an amendment to the Norfolk County zoning bylaw for the regulation of the shipping containers. As part of this amendment, the proposal is to define shipping containers and their locations of permitted their zones where they may be permitted, as well as recognizing the use of shipping containers on a temporary basis. So in terms of the shipping containers, the definition as proposed, which can be seen in the report as well as on the screen, is shall mean a container or standardized transportation box with strength suitable to withstand repeated use for shipment, storage, and handling via multiple modes of sea and ground transportation, including freight, rail, road, and water. And as identified through the bylaw, there are a number of zones in which the shipping containers are proposed to be permitted as of right, and those include all of our industrial zones, our central business district zone, our shopping center commercial zone, the service commercial zone, our hamlet commercial zone, rural commercial zone, marine commercial zone, as well as the agricultural zone. So under those zones, they would all be permitted as of right. And within every zone, save and except the agricultural zone, they would also be subject to site plan control. Site plan control is already applicable for all of those zones in which any new additions, buildings, or changes are proposed to the site. So this would fall under that existing site plan control bylaw for placement and regulation of the shipping containers. Additionally, the bylaw also recognizes the use of shipping containers on a property and for temporary basis for the purposes of say housing renovations or moving requirements where they can be permitted on a temporary basis if they're needed for either of those options. This amendment was brought forward due to a number of concerns that were being raised as part of shipping containers and their placement. We can see that there's a number of situations where they can be found in some of the residential zones, commercial zones, and industrial zones within the county already. In terms of one of the zones, and the reasoning behind not permitting them in residential zones is in terms of size of the structures, which normally exceed the accessory building requirements under our current residential zones, as well as sighting and potential visibility issues. The site plan review process would recognize and would look at potential buffering of shipping containers as accessory uses on properties. As part of the process, the draft bylaw was circulated to our development information systems and is also included as part of an open house. Through both of those processes, we did not receive or hear any feedback in terms of concerns regarding the bylaw or the zones as permitted, as well as nothing was received in terms of public notification from members of the public. Based on the foregoing, staff are recommending support of the bylaw, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have as council.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Shannon.
you.
Certainly, I read the report from front to back, and I think my opinion is very well done. Thank you. Okay, now it's time for questions. I'll start with Councillor Height, then Councillor Black, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Through you to planning. Did I hear that correctly? If someone comes to get a permit for one of these, that their property becomes put under site plan control from that moment forward?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the properties as listed are already subject to site plan control. So if they wanted to put in a shipping container or if they wanted to construct an accessory building, they would be subject to the same regulations as it stands right now.
So if they're not on site plan control, or all of these are on site plan control right now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they're all subject to site plan control as it stands right now through the site plan control bylaw that was passed a number of years ago.
Oh, really? Okay. And so at this meeting that you had, with all these great concerns over these sea containers, 0 people showed up?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. These are much larger than a small 9x12 utility shed that does not need permit or site plan. Councillor Black, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Luke, and through you to staff. Up on the screen, it says permitted all industrial zones. The second one, Central Business District Zone. I don't have any problem with it, except there are residential properties in the CBD. Just right around us, we're sitting in the CBD right here. There's quite a number of residential properties. Nice properties going out on Talbot Street North. What about them? Did you consider that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the CBD zone, the overall intent is intended for a broad range of commercial type development. So in terms of that, the thought process was that we want to be as flexible as we can in terms of our downtowns and our allowances on our commercial properties. As well as part of that, if they were to establish one, they would be subject to the site plan control, where we'd be able to look at the placement of where the container is going to go on a property and look at additional requirements in terms of screening or buffering. So if it is proposed to be adjacent to a residential lot or residential property, we could request that a private privacy or wood fence be installed to add to the buffering along it, or alternative measures, maybe landscaping or something along those lines. I'm just going to change a slide here. This is one of the properties that we have had involved, and as you can see on the slide on the kind of the top right there, the red block shows the approximate location of the shipping container that was placed on a property. You can see it's kind of in the front yard of the residential use that's behind it. So as part of that, what we looked at to include as part of the site plan process was screening. So you can see there's now a board-on-board fence that provides that break so that the residence isn't staring right at the shipping container. So that's one of the steps that we would take in terms of the recognition under the CBD zone and any of the residential properties that might be adjacent.
Well, still have some concerns about, I don't have any concerns about them being on the commercial properties, but there are residential areas, and I am concerned about that, but I guess you've answered that question. Second question, a little bit further on, near the end of the report, you talked about, let me read it so if I got it clear. It is noted that any existing shipping containers currently located on properties that did not receive the appropriate approvals, brackets, building permits or site plan, end of brackets, are not considered to be legally in compliance and are subject to bylaw enforcement. So if there's ones that are already out there, ones that have a building permit would be grandfathered in. Ones that do not have a building permit would be asked to leave. Did I have that right?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Essentially, yes, that is correct. They were placed on the property without the appropriate approvals. So as it stands right now, they aren't legal as it stands. So this bylaw would not, in fact, legalize them. And it would come down in terms of enforcement perspective, whether this bylaw is kind of here now or not in effect. If there was a complaint filed with respect to that shipping container, bylaw enforcement would have to deal with it. This bylaw would not negate any of that existing situations if one was put on a property without the proper approvals in place.
Councillor Columbus, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the planners. It talks about the industrial commercial zone, which would permit shipping containers, but I take it not in the front yard. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Right. Okay. And what about a rural lot, a rural residential lot, a 1 acre severed house off a farm, somebody buys it, it's zoned agriculture right now, right? Can they have a shipping container at the side yard or the front yard? Or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, they would be permitted under the agricultural zone. We're not going into specifics in terms of lot size, but they would just need, as it stands, they would still need any required building permits as per the Ontario Building Code for footings and foundations, but that's not changing as to the current requirements.
So if you had 2 or 3 of those together in a group fronting one of our municipal roads, you're saying that a shipping container would be permitted even in the front yard of those rural residential properties?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they would not be permitted in the front yard. They would still have to be subject to the provisions of the agricultural zones in terms of yard setbacks and placements, and accessory buildings are not permitted within the required front yard, so they would have to be set back from the property frontage.
And lastly, there's a number of these out there. Nobody would be going out on a witch hunt. It'd be complaint driven, I take it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions to staff? Councillor Brunton, please.
Yes, very quickly, Mayor Luke, through you to Shannon. Shannon, you say agricultural land does not require site plan, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
But they do need a building permit?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
And I remember Fritz telling us, is it quite complicated though for somebody who wants he talked about foundations or footings for them? Is that going to be a requirement?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as per the Ontario Building Code, they would be required to have proper footings and foundations. And it's also my understanding that they would just need to be signed off in terms of to ensure that they're structurally sound as per the Ontario Building Code. But those are regulations that are currently in place, and as per the OBC requirements, through this bylaw, there's nothing being changed in terms of those requirements as they stand.
So all the containers that are on agricultural land now basically sit there in most cases, or on a slab, but they're non-conforming, I guess, or how would you, are they going to have to be changed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're not going to be going out and searching for any of the existing shipping containers. If there's a complaint filed with respect to a property or shipping containers, our bylaw enforcement would have to do a follow-up, and it would be up to our building and bylaw division in terms of determining what their compliance would have to be or what they would need to do. If they received a permit, the shipping containers are considered a structure under the Ontario Building Code, and with that they are required to have proper footings or foundations depending on the type of structure that they are. So that is a requirement that is in existence now and would continue to run as such.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I'm going to move on then. Anyone in attendance who wishes to speak in support of this amendment? Is there anyone in attendance who wishes to speak in opposition or in general terms to this amendment? Anything further from council? Mover, seconder to close. Oliver? Columbus have moved and seconded to close public meeting. Those in favor? That is carried. Open for direction, Councillor Black.
Mr. Mayor, I would move the recommendation in the report, but I'd like to include that the, never wrote it down, that it is permitted in the CBD except where the property is a residential home.
Just for clarification, I'm not trying to challenge your addition to this, where it is on a residential property in that zone or residential property abutting, I mean, next door to a commercial. I just want to be clear what you're after here.
Permitted in the CBD.
Yes.
Except where the property is a residential home. Okay, so in other words, the home is in the CBD, in that zoning, but it would be exempt, or not permitted on that residential property within the CBD.
What is that zone again?
Central Business District.
CBD, thank you. So the proposed amendment as printed would have the addition after be approved for reasons that I just want to make sure you're happy with the wording before I get a seconder, that a residential property in the central business district not be permitted to have a shipping container. Be allowed a shipping.
You're paraphrasing what I said, but it's the same thing, I think.
Okay, that's the intent, right?
Yes.
I can have the clerk tidy that up. Black has moved. I will need a seconder if we're going to discuss this. Councillor Sonnenberg? Black has moved, Sonnenberg has seconded that the proposed amendment to our zoning bylaw 1Z 2014 to implement provisions relating to shipping containers be approved for reasons as outlined in the report, and that a residential property in the CBD district not be allowed to have a shipping container, and that no public input has been received for this application and therefore was evaluated as part of this recommendation discussion on the motion. Councillor Height, then Sonnenberg, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I'd like to move that motion for deferral. Is that in order?
The deferral of this motion is indeed, takes precedent as well. So, do I need a seconder for that? Yes, I do. Just hold on a second. I have a mover. You'll write the deferral for me. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for deferral? Brunton has seconded. Okay, the deferral, speak to the deferral only. Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. We've had one deputation, which was the one complaint. We've had zero public show up that it doesn't seem like it's a big issue with them. I know I received 2 phone calls. They both ended with, "Don't you guys have something better to do with your time?" Okay, so is it that big of a deal? Personally, I don't think it is. How are we going to enforce it? The policing all over the county. Are we going to send our 1 or 2 bylaw guys out for the whole area because they may not have one, they might have one? It's just, I think we can do without it. I'd like to defer it indefinitely. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you can't defeat something through indefinite deferral. You have to vote on it to defeat it. You can't just put something on the back burner forever. So the deferral should have some time frame or direction to staff to bring it back forward again.
6 months, 3 months, but not definitely that.
4 years would be fine, Mr. Mayor.
I'm thinking that you're thinking you're going to be here in 4 years. I probably won't, and you will.
If they like sea containers, maybe.
What would you suggest for a time period?
1 year.
In order? To the deferral, I have Councillor Sonnenberg and then Black. To the deferral.
I wasn't going to speak to the deferral, but since it's on the floor, I will. Once again, as was mentioned by our speakers here before tonight, this is overkill. There's got to be a difference between a building permit for something that you're actually going to build and something you're going to plop on the lot. There is, first of all, sea containers do not need footings and foundations. They are a structure unto themselves. They support themselves. Foundations support buildings. Sea containers support themselves. That's the way they're built. So, if you look at all the implications of a building permit and all the inspections, there's footings, there's foundations, there's framing, there's insulation, there's vapor barriers, there's electrical, there's plumbing, blah, 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 blah. None of this goes on with a sea container. So can't this be classified some other way other than by a building permit? Call it a permit or a registration or something, but don't bring it under the building code. We're not building anything. It's a box that you put on the lot. That's different than building something. So I'm going to support the deferral. Thank you.
Councillor Black, deferral.
I don't know why Councillor Height just doesn't vote against the motion if he wants to defeat it rather than try a different tactic like deferring it. And I do understand what Councillor Sonnenberg is saying, but that would be comments more appropriate to the actual motion where we could make an amendment according to his concerns. But we can't do that under deferral. So I am concerned about the deputation that we had, and I do want to deal with this, so I will not support the deferral. I think we need to deal with it.
Anything else on the deferral? Columbus, please.
Well, with respect to the temporary units that are set up in a residential construction site, would they have to have a building inspection with a foundation put under it, that would cost more than the sea container.
If they have gone under the building permit to get there in the first place, they're obviously been allowed,
They're
but,
temporary, they'd be there for a month.
sorry, I misunderstood your question. Shannon, the question is, if they're a temporary 1 month, it seems to me a foundation would be kind of a waste of money.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, if they're there on a temporary basis, the permits aren't required because they're not considered a permanent structure. They're not there. They've got a temporal time limitation to them, whereas if they're placed on a property as an accessory building, they're there essentially on a permanent basis. They don't have that same temporal component to them.
I don't think that question had anything to do with the deferral. Why did I let you ask that? Councillor Oliver, I trust you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. I am going to, I'm not supporting the deferral. This did come to us originally. I respect my colleague and why he's concerned about this. It came to us as a complaint. Our staff had no ability to act on the complaint because we had no bylaw to deal with shipping containers. If this passes as a bylaw, it will only apply, it will only be enforced on a complaint basis, Mr. Mayor, and our staff need that tool. So it should be dealt with. I can't support a deferral. Let's deal with the matter tonight.
Anything else?